The silence after a funeral is deafening, but what my son said to me that day broke something inside me that I never thought could be repaired. My name is Victoria, and I thought I knew my family. I thought 43 years of marriage meant something. I thought raising 3 children together created unbreakable bonds. I was wrong about everything. The rain hadn't stopped since we buried my husband Robert 3 days ago. The house felt empty without his morning coffee ritual, without his evening news commentary, without his gentle snoring beside me. But what I wasn't prepared for was the coldness that would replace the warmth we'd built together. I was sitting in our kitchen, my kitchen now, staring at the untouched casseroles neighbors had brought, when I heard the front door open. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway, and I recognized the sound immediately. Marcus, my eldest son, had arrived with his wife Jennifer and their twin boys. "Mom," Marcus called out, his voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. "In the kitchen, sweetheart," I replied, forcing a smile as I wiped my eyes. I expected a hug, maybe some gentle words about moving forward together. Instead, Marcus walked in with a manila envelope clutched in his hand and an expression that made my blood run cold. "We need to talk," he said, not bothering to greet me properly. Jennifer stood behind him, avoiding eye contact, while the boys fidgeted nervously. "Of course, honey. Sit down. Are you hungry? Mrs. Patterson from next door brought over." "Mom, stop!" Marcus's voice cut through my rambling like a knife. "This isn't a social visit." Something in his tone made me set down the dish towel I'd been clutching. "What's wrong? You're scaring me." Marcus placed the envelope on the kitchen table with a deliberate thud. "Dad's will was read yesterday. We know everything." My heart began to race. "Everything about what?" "About the debts, Mom. About the mortgage. About the credit cards." His voice grew louder with each word. "About how you and Dad spent the last 5 years hemorrhaging money while pretending everything was fine." The air seemed to leave the room. I felt my legs weaken, and I gripped the back of a chair for support. "Marcus, I can explain." "Can you?" Jennifer finally spoke up, her voice sharp with accusation. "Can you explain how you spent our children's college funds? Can you explain how you mortgaged this house not once, but twice? Can you explain how you've been living a lie for years?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. The weight of our financial struggles, the secrets Robert and I had kept, the mounting pressure we'd hidden from our children, it all came crashing down at once. "The house is underwater, Mom," Marcus continued, his voice now cold and calculated. "The bank owns more of it than you do. The life insurance barely covers Dad's funeral expenses. There's nothing left." That's not entirely true," I managed to whisper. "Oh, it gets better," Marcus said, pulling papers from the envelope. "According to Dad's will, this house goes to me. And given the financial situation, I've already spoken with a real estate agent. We're selling." The words hit me like physical blows. "Selling? Marcus, this is my home. This is where we raised you children. This is where your father and I, where you and Dad made terrible decisions that affected all of us," he interrupted. "Do you know that Emma had to take out additional student loans because the education fund was empty? Do you know that David had to give up his dream of starting his own business because he couldn't count on the financial support you and Dad had promised?" Tears began streaming down my face. "We never meant for this to happen. Your father lost his job and the medical bills from his heart condition were manageable if you hadn't been living beyond your means for years," Jennifer interjected. "We hired a financial advisor, Victoria. We know exactly how long this has been going on." The room began to spin. I sank into the chair, feeling older than my 67 years. "What are you saying?" Marcus leaned forward, his expression hardening. "I'm saying that Jennifer and I have decided to buy this house from the estate. We're going to renovate it and move in with the boys. It's the only way to keep it in the family." "And where exactly do you think I'm going to live?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus and Jennifer exchanged a look that told me everything I needed to know. "There are some nice assisted living facilities in the area," Jennifer said, her tone attempting to sound compassionate, but failing miserably. "Given your age and the fact that you'll be alone now, It might be for the best. I stared at my son, the boy I'd rocked to sleep, taught to ride a bike, cheered for at every soccer game, and saw a stranger. "You want to put me in a nursing home?" "It's not a nursing home, Mom. It's assisted living. Very different." "I don't need assistance." I stood up, surprising myself with the force in my voice. "I need my home. I need my family. I need my son to remember that I'm his mother, not some burden to be shuffled off." Marcus stood up as well, his 6-foot frame towering over me. "You should have thought about that before you and Dad spent our inheritance." The cruelty in his words took my breath away. Our inheritance? This was never about inheritance, Marcus. This was about family, about love, about the life your father and I built together. A life built on lies and financial irresponsibility, Jennifer added, her voice dripping with disdain. I looked at my daughter-in-law, remembering the day Marcus had brought her home for the first time. I'd welcomed her with open arms, treated her like the daughter I'd never had. Now she looked at me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. "I want to speak to Emma and David," I said, grasping for some support from my other children. "They already know," Marcus replied. "They agree with our decision." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. They agree? "Mom, we're all adults with families of our own. We can't take care of you financially. This is the best solution for everyone." "Everyone except me," I whispered. Marcus's expression softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. "You have until the end of the month to pack your things. The realtor is coming next week to assess the property." "The end of the month? That's only 3 weeks away. It's plenty of time to sort through your belongings and find a suitable place." I felt something break inside me, not just my heart, but my spirit. I looked around the kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals, where I'd helped with homework, where I'd celebrated birthdays and holidays. Every surface held a memory. Every corner told a story of the family we'd built. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" Marcus looked taken aback. "Get out of my house," I repeated, my voice growing stronger. "If you're going to treat me like a stranger, then that's what you are to me. Get out." "Mom, you're being dramatic." "Get out," I screamed, surprising even myself with the volume. "Get out of here before I call the police." Marcus grabbed the envelope and headed toward the door, Jennifer close behind him. "You have 3 weeks, Mom. Don't make this harder than it has to be." After they left, I stood in my empty kitchen, surrounded by the silence that had become my constant companion. The casseroles sat cooling on the counter, gifts from neighbors who cared more about my well-being than my own children seemed to. I walked to the living room and sat in Robert's chair, the one he'd claimed as his own for over 20 years. The leather still smelled like his cologne, and for a moment I could almost pretend he was just in the next room. But reality crashed back quickly. I was alone, about to be homeless, and apparently despised by the children I'd devoted my life to raising. That's when I remembered the conversation I'd had with Robert just 2 months before he died. He'd been worried about the kids, about how they'd handle things after he was gone. He'd insisted we meet with a lawyer, not just about the will, but about other matters. "Victoria," he'd said, holding my hand in his hospital bed, "promise me you'll call Margaret if anything happens. Promise me you'll protect yourself. Margaret Collins." The attorney we'd consulted about estate planning. The woman who'd asked us pointed questions about our children's attitudes toward money, toward us, toward responsibility. I walked to Robert's desk and pulled out his address book. Margaret's number was there, written in his careful handwriting. I stared at the number for a long time, Robert's words echoing in my mind. "Promise me you'll protect yourself." With trembling fingers, I picked up the phone and dialed. "Collins Law Firm, this is Margaret speaking." "Margaret, this is Victoria Hendricks, Robert's wife, widow. I think I need your help." The next morning I sat in Margaret Collins's office, clutching a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The walls were lined with law books and certificates, but what struck me most was a framed photo on her desk, a picture of her with her elderly mother, both of them smiling at some family gathering. "Tell me everything, Victoria," Margaret said, her voice gentle but professional. She was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Start from the beginning." I told her about the funeral, about Marcus's visit, about the ultimatum. As I spoke, Margaret took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just listening with an expression that grew more concerned with each detail. "And you say Robert left the house to Marcus in his will?" she asked when I finished. "That's what Marcus claims. I haven't seen the actual will myself." Margaret leaned back in her chair, a slight frown creasing her brow. "Victoria, I helped Robert draft that will. The house was left to you, with provisions for the children only after your death, or if you chose to move to assisted living." My heart stopped. "What?" "The house is yours, Victoria. Legally, unequivocally yours. Marcus has no right to sell it or force you out." I felt like I was drowning and suddenly found air. But he said, "He had papers. I'd like to see those papers. In the meantime, I need you to understand something very important. You are not powerless here. You have rights, and I intend to make sure they are protected." For the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. "What do we do?" Margaret opened a file drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "First, we're going to review your actual will and estate documents. Then we're going to have a conversation about your financial situation. The real situation, not the version your children seem to believe." Over the next hour, Margaret walked me through documents that Robert and I had signed months earlier. The will was clear. The house was mine, along with a life insurance policy I'd forgotten about, and a small investment account Robert had kept separate from our joint finances. "But what about the debts?" I asked. Marcus was right about the money problems. "Let's look at the actual numbers," Margaret said, pulling up documents on her computer. "Yes, you have debt. Yes, the house has been refinanced, but the situation isn't as dire as your children seem to believe." She showed me spreadsheets that Robert had prepared, detailing our financial situation. While we weren't wealthy, we weren't destitute either. The life insurance, combined with Robert's pension and Social Security, would cover most of our debts and leave me with a modest but livable income. "Why would Marcus lie about this?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Margaret's expression grew serious. "Victoria, I've been practicing law for 25 years. I've seen this scenario more times than I care to count. Sometimes when people see inheritance as their right rather than a gift, they'll manipulate the truth to get what they want faster." The weight of her words settled over me like a heavy blanket. "My son is trying to steal my house." "It appears that way, yes." I sat in silence for a moment, processing this revelation. The Marcus I'd raised wouldn't have done this. But then again, the Marcus I'd raised wouldn't have spoken to me the way he had yesterday. "What's our next step?" I asked. "We're going to send a letter to Marcus, copied to Emma and David, clarifying the actual terms of the will and making it clear that any attempt to force you from your home will result in legal action. Won't that just make things worse between us?" Margaret leaned forward, her expression compassionate but firm. "Victoria, I understand you want to preserve your relationship with your children, but right now, they're counting on your maternal instincts to override your self-preservation. Sometimes, you have to fight for respect before you can have love." I left Margaret's office with a copy of the will and a plan, but I also left with a heavy heart, knowing that the battle for my home was really a battle for my dignity, and that the opponents were the people I loved most in the world. When I got home, I found Emma's car in the driveway. My heart leaped. Maybe she was here to offer support, to tell me that Marcus had overstepped. I found her in the living room going through photo albums with her 16-year-old daughter, Chloe. "Hi, Mom," Emma said, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted to grab some pictures before..." "Before what?" I asked, though I already knew. "Before the house gets sold. I wanted Chloe to see some of these old family photos, understand our history here." I sat down across from them, noticing how Emma avoided direct eye contact. She looked so much like I had at her age. Same auburn hair, same green eyes, same stubborn set to her jaw. "Emma, we need to talk." "I know what you're going to say, Mom. and I'm sorry, I really am. But Marcus is right about the financial situation. We can't afford to maintain this house, and you can't afford to live here alone. According to who? Emma looked up, surprised by the firmness in my voice. According to the will reading, according to the debts, according to reality. I pulled out the copy of the will Margaret had given me and placed it on the coffee table. Have you actually read the will, Emma? Marcus showed us the relevant parts. The relevant parts according to Marcus or the actual will? Emma's expression grew uncertain. She reached for the document and I watched her face change as she read the first page. This says the house goes to you, she said slowly. That's right. But Marcus said, Marcus lied. The words hung in the air between us. Chloe looked back and forth between her mother and me, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding its source. Mom, there has to be some mistake, Emma said, but her voice lacked conviction. The only mistake was trusting that my children would honor their father's wishes and treat me with respect. Emma set down the will and looked at me directly for the first time since I'd arrived. Are you saying Marcus deliberately misrepresented Dad's will? I'm saying that your brother wants this house, and he's willing to manipulate all of us to get it. I could see the conflict playing out on Emma's face. Like me, she wanted to believe the best of Marcus. Like me, she was being forced to confront a reality that didn't match her expectations. What about the debts? She asked quietly. What about them? Are they as bad as Marcus said? I sat down next to her and took her hand. Emma, your father and I made some financial mistakes. We spent money we didn't have, and we refinanced the house more than once. But we're not bankrupt, and I'm not destitute. Then why didn't you correct us when Marcus said those things? The question hit me like a slap. Because I was grieving, because I was overwhelmed, because I trusted my children to take care of me, not plot against me. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have questioned it. I should have looked at the documents myself. Yes, you should have, but you're here now, and that's what matters. Chloe, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. Grandma, are you going to be okay? I looked at my granddaughter, seeing the worry in her young face, and felt my resolve strengthen. Yes, sweetheart, I'm going to be just fine. But even as I said the words, I knew the real battle was just beginning. Marcus wasn't going to back down easily, and I was about to learn just how far he was willing to go to get what he wanted. That evening, after Emma and Chloe left, I called David. Of all my children, he'd always been the most level-headed, the most likely to see reason. Mom, I was wondering when you'd call, he said, his voice weary. David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Did you see the actual will or just what Marcus told you about it? There was a long pause. Just what Marcus told us. Why? Because Marcus lied to all of us. I heard David sigh deeply. Mom, look, I know you're upset about the house situation, but David, stop. Just stop and listen to me. I told him everything. About the real will, about the financial situation, about Margaret's assessment. When I finished, David was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, Are you telling me that Marcus fabricated the will reading? I'm telling you that Marcus told you his version of the will, not the actual will. Jesus, Mom, do you realize what you're saying? You're accusing Marcus of attempting to commit fraud. I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm telling you what the legal documents say versus what he told you they say. Another long pause. I need to see these documents myself. Come over tomorrow. Bring the kids. We'll go through everything together. And if you're right, if Marcus really did misrepresent everything, then we'll deal with that when we come to it. After I hung up, I sat in Robert's chair again, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. I was essentially going to war with my eldest son, and I wasn't sure who would still be standing when it was over. But Robert's words echoed in my mind. Promise me you'll protect yourself. I picked up the phone and called Margaret. I want to move forward with the letter, I told her, all of it. The will clarification, the cease and desist, everything. Are you sure, Victoria? Once we send this, there's no going back to the way things were. I looked around my living room at the photos of my children at various ages, at the life Robert and I had built together. At the home I'd been told I had to abandon. Margaret, the way things were ended the moment my son told me to get out of my own house. It's time to fight back. The letter arrived at Marcus's house on a Tuesday morning, delivered by certified mail. I know because Margaret had arranged for confirmation of delivery, and I know because my phone started ringing 30 minutes later. What the hell is this? Marcus's voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. It's a legal document explaining your father's actual will, I replied, surprised by how calm I sounded. You hired a lawyer against your own family. I hired a lawyer to protect myself from people who were trying to defraud me. The fact that those people happen to be related to me doesn't change anything. I heard Jennifer's voice in the background, sharp and angry, though I couldn't make out the words. Mom, you're making a huge mistake. We were trying to help you. By lying to me about Dad's will. By trying to force me into a nursing home. By claiming ownership of my house. That's an interesting definition of help, Marcus. The house is going to bankrupt you. You can't afford the upkeep, the taxes, the utilities on a fixed income. That's my decision to make, not yours. Fine, Marcus said, his voice turning cold. If you want to play hardball, we'll play hardball. Don't expect any help from us when you're struggling to pay bills. I haven't expected help from you since you told me to get out of here, I replied. The only thing I expect now is to be left alone in my own home. Marcus hung up without another word. An hour later, Emma called. Mom, I just got off the phone with Marcus. He's furious. I imagine he is. It's hard to be caught in a lie. He's saying you're being manipulated by the lawyer, that you don't understand the financial implications of keeping the house. Emma, I'm 67 years old. I've been managing finances for longer than you've been alive. I think I can handle my own money. But what if he's right? What if you can't afford it? I took a deep breath, hearing the doubt in my daughter's voice. Emma, would you rather see me lose the house because I genuinely can't afford it, or lose it because someone lied to me and scared me into giving it up? I'd rather see you safe and secure. Then trust me to make that decision for myself. That afternoon, David arrived with his wife Rachel and their 2 teenage sons. Unlike Marcus's confrontational visit, David came bearing groceries and an offer to help me organize the financial paperwork. I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with, he said as we sat at the kitchen table. Not Marcus's version, not the lawyer's version, the actual numbers. We spent 3 hours going through everything. Robert's pension, my Social Security, the life insurance payout, the remaining mortgage balance, the credit card debts, monthly expenses. David, who worked as an accountant, created a detailed spreadsheet. Okay, he said finally, leaning back in his chair. You're not wealthy, but you're not destitute either. With some careful budgeting and maybe a part-time job or rental income from the basement apartment, you can make this work. The basement apartment? Mom, you've got a fully finished basement with its own entrance. Dad set it up as a workshop, but it could easily be converted to a rental unit. That income alone would cover most of your monthly expenses. I stared at my youngest son, amazed by his practical approach. Why didn't Marcus think of any of these options? David's expression grew troubled. Because Marcus didn't want to find options, he wanted the house. What do you mean? Mom, I love my brother, but he's always felt entitled to things. When we were kids, he expected the biggest piece of cake, the best seat in the car, the most expensive Christmas gifts. He's never outgrown that attitude. Rachel nodded in agreement. He's been talking about this house for years, about how it would be perfect for his family, about the renovations he wanted to do. I think he saw Dad's death as an opportunity. The words hurt, but they also rang true. I remembered Marcus walking through the house during Robert's illness, making comments about the outdated kitchen, the old carpeting, how much potential the place had. So what do I do now? I asked. You live your life, David said simply. You stay in your house, you figure out your finances, and you let Marcus deal with his own disappointment. And if he doesn't let it go, David's expression hardened. Then he'll have to deal with all of us. Emma's already called me twice today, apologizing for not questioning things sooner. We're not going to let him bully you. That evening, I called Margaret to update her on the family reactions. "It sounds like you're building a support system," she said. "That's good. You're going to need it." "What do you mean?" "Victoria, I've been doing some research on Marcus's financial situation. He and Jennifer are in significant debt themselves. Credit cards, car loans, a mortgage that's probably more than they can afford. This house represents more than just family property to them. It represents financial salvation." My heart sank. "Are you saying they're desperate?" "I'm saying that desperate people sometimes do desperate things. I want you to be prepared for the possibility that this situation could escalate." "Escalate how?" "I don't know yet. But I want you to document everything. Every phone call, every visit, every interaction. If this goes to court, we'll need evidence of their behavior." I hung up, feeling more anxious than ever. The idea that my own son might be desperate enough to do something drastic was terrifying. My fears were realized the next morning when I woke up to find my front door standing wide open. I grabbed the baseball bat Robert had kept beside the bed and crept downstairs, my heart pounding. The house was quiet, but I could see that someone had been inside. Papers were scattered across the living room floor, drawers had been pulled open, and Robert's desk had been ransacked. I called the police first, then Margaret. "Don't touch anything," Margaret said. "This is a crime scene now." The police officer who responded was a young man named Officer Martinez. He was thorough and professional, taking photos and dusting for fingerprints. "Any idea who might have done this?" he asked. I hesitated. The thought of accusing my own son of breaking into my house felt surreal, but the evidence was pointing in an uncomfortable direction. "I'm having a dispute with my son about the house," I said carefully. "He believes he owns it. I've recently had to hire a lawyer to clarify the legal situation." Officer Martinez made notes. "We'll need to process this as a burglary, but if you suspect someone specific, we can look into that as well." After the police left, I called David. "Someone broke into the house," I told him. "Oh my God, Mom, are you okay? Did they take anything?" "I don't think so. They seem to be looking for something specific. Papers, documents." There was a pause. "Mom, you don't think—" "I don't want to think it, David, but the timing is awfully suspicious." "I'm coming over." While I waited for David, I tried to piece together what the intruder might have been looking for. Robert's desk had been the primary target, along with the filing cabinet where we kept important documents. But Margaret had copies of everything important, so even if they'd found something, it wouldn't change the legal situation. David arrived with Rachel and immediately set about helping me clean up the mess. As we worked, I noticed that Robert's spare keys were missing from their hook in the kitchen. "David," I said, holding up the empty key hook, "the spare keys are gone." David's face went pale. "Mom, we need to change the locks, today." "You really think Marcus would—" "I think we can't afford to assume he wouldn't." That afternoon, a locksmith came and changed all the locks on the house. I also had a security system installed, something Robert and I had discussed but never followed through on. As evening approached, I sat in my living room, looking at the new alarm panel on the wall. My house had never felt less like home. I was living in fear of my own children, documenting conversations with family members, and sleeping with a baseball bat beside my bed. But I was still in my house. I was still fighting for what was mine. My phone rang, and I saw Emma's name on the caller ID. "Mom, I just heard about the break-in. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, honey, just shaken up." Do you think it was Marcus?" The question hung in the air between us. I could hear the pain in Emma's voice, the same pain I was feeling. "I don't know," I said finally. "I hope not." "Mom, I'm scared. I'm scared of what this is doing to our family." "I'm scared too, Emma. But I can't let fear make me give up my home and my dignity. Your father wouldn't want that." "I know. I just wish there was another way." There was another way. Marcus chose not to take it. After we hung up, I walked through my house, checking the new locks, setting the alarm, making sure all the windows were secure. This was my life now, afraid in my own home, suspicious of my own children, preparing for battles I'd never imagined fighting. But as I passed the mantelpiece, I stopped at the photo of Robert and me on our wedding day. We were so young, so hopeful, so certain that love would conquer everything. I'm keeping my promise, I whispered to his picture. I'm protecting myself. The next morning, Margaret called with news that would change everything. Victoria, I've been reviewing the documents that were filed with the probate court. Someone has filed a challenge to the will. My blood ran cold. Who? Marcus. He's claiming that the will is invalid due to your husband's mental incapacity at the time of signing. That's ridiculous. Robert was completely lucid when we met with you. I know that, and I have documentation to prove it. But this means we're going to court, Victoria. This is about to become a very public, very expensive legal battle. I sank into my chair, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. My son wasn't just trying to take my house. He was trying to destroy his father's memory and my reputation in the process. What do we do? I asked. We fight, Margaret said simply, and we win. The courthouse was intimidating, all marble floors and echoing footsteps. I sat beside Margaret at the plaintiff's table, wearing my best navy dress and trying to project confidence I didn't feel. Across the aisle, Marcus sat with his attorney, a sharp-dressed man who looked like he charged more per hour than I spent on groceries in a month. Remember, Margaret whispered, answer only what's asked. Don't volunteer information, and don't let them provoke you. I nodded, my hands trembling slightly as I watched the bailiff call the court to order. Judge Patricia Reinhardt was a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and intelligent eyes. She reviewed the case file before looking up at both tables. This is a will contest, she began, brought by Marcus Hendricks against the estate of Robert Hendricks, challenging the validity of the will based on claims of mental incapacity. Mr. Hendricks, your opening statement. Marcus's lawyer, a man named Stephen Blackwood, stood up and began painting a picture of my husband that was almost unrecognizable. According to his version, Robert had been suffering from dementia, was heavily medicated, and was easily manipulated by me into signing documents he didn't understand. Your Honor, Blackwood said, we will show that Robert Hendricks was not of sound mind when he signed this will, and that his wife, Victoria Hendricks, took advantage of his diminished capacity to secure the family home for herself at the expense of his children. I felt my face burn with anger and humiliation. These lies were being spoken in a public courtroom, becoming part of the permanent record. When Margaret stood for her opening statement, her voice was calm and measured. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Robert Hendricks was mentally competent when he signed his will. We have medical records, witness testimony, and documentation of his clear understanding of his financial situation and his wishes for his estate. This is not a case of mental incapacity. This is a case of a son who is unhappy with his father's legal decisions and is trying to use the court system to overturn them. The first witness called was Dr. Stephen Morrison, Robert's cardiologist. Under questioning from Blackwood, he confirmed that Robert had been on various medications and had suffered from some confusion during his final hospitalization. Doctor, Blackwood asked, in your professional opinion, could the medications Mr. Hendricks was taking have affected his mental clarity? It's possible, Dr. Morrison replied. Some cardiac medications can cause confusion or disorientation, particularly in elderly patients. I watched the judge making notes and felt my stomach clench with anxiety. But Margaret's cross-examination told a different story. Dr. Morrison, when was the last time you saw Mr. Hendricks in your office for a routine appointment? About 3 weeks before his death. And how would you describe his mental state during that appointment? He was alert, oriented, and able to discuss his treatment options intelligently. He asked detailed questions about his prognosis and medications. Did you have any concerns about his mental capacity during that visit? None whatsoever. And doctor, are you aware that Mr. Hendricks signed his will approximately 1 month before his death, not during his final hospitalization? I was not aware of the specific timing, no. So your testimony about medication-induced confusion would not apply to the time period when the will was signed. That's correct. I felt a small surge of hope as Margaret returned to our table. The next witness was Jennifer, Marcus's wife. She testified about Robert's supposed confusion during family visits, claiming he often forgot conversations and seemed disoriented. Mrs. Hendricks, Blackwood asked, did you observe any instances where Robert seemed to be influenced by his wife in ways that concerned you? Yes, Jennifer replied, not meeting my eyes. Victoria would often finish his sentences or answer questions for him. It seemed like she was controlling what he said. I gripped my hands in my lap, wanting to scream that I'd been helping Robert when he was tired, not controlling him. Margaret's cross-examination was surgical. Mrs. Hendricks, how often did you visit Robert and Victoria during his illness? Maybe once or twice a month. And these visits typically lasted how long? An hour or two. So your observations are based on perhaps 20 hours of contact over the final months of Robert's life. I suppose so. Are you aware that Victoria was Robert's primary caregiver, spending 24 hours a day with him? Yes. And isn't it natural for a spouse who's caring for someone with a serious illness to help them communicate when they are tired or in pain? Jennifer's face flushed. I suppose. Mrs. Hendricks, do you have any medical training that would qualify you to assess someone's mental capacity? No. Have you ever witnessed Robert signing legal documents? No. So your testimony is based purely on your personal interpretation of casual family interactions. I was just saying what I observed. Margaret nodded. And what you observed was a loving wife caring for her sick husband. Thank you. No further questions. The turning point came when Margaret called me to testify. I walked to the witness stand on shaking legs, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Margaret's questions were gentle, allowing me to tell my story in my own words. I described Robert's illness, our financial discussions, his insistence on meeting with the lawyer, and his clear understanding of what he wanted to do with his estate. Mrs. Hendricks, Margaret asked, did your husband ever express any confusion about his will or his wishes for the disposition of his property? Never. Robert was very clear about wanting me to be secure in my home. He worried about what would happen to me after he was gone, especially given our children's attitudes about money. What do you mean by their attitudes about money? I looked across the courtroom at Marcus, sitting stone-faced beside his lawyer. Robert had noticed that our children seemed to view his estate as their inheritance, rather than his property to dispose of as he saw fit. He was concerned they might pressure me to sell the house or make financial decisions that weren't in my best interest. Blackwood's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned my own mental capacity, suggested I was lying about Robert's condition, and painted me as a manipulative woman who had isolated her husband from his children. Mrs. Hendricks, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Isn't it true that you prevented your children from having private conversations with their father during his illness? That's absolutely false. They were welcome in our home anytime. But you were always present during their visits, weren't you? I was present because I lived there and because Robert needed constant care. If they had wanted private time with him, they could have asked. Did they ever ask? I paused, realizing the trap he was setting. No, they didn't. So how do you know they would have been welcome to have private conversations if they never felt comfortable enough to ask? I felt my face flush with anger. They were comfortable enough to lie about his will and try to steal my house. I think they could have managed to ask for a private conversation. Objection, Blackwood called out. Sustained, the judge said. Mrs. Hendricks, please answer only the question asked. But I could see from the judge's expression that my point had been made. The most powerful testimony came from Margaret herself, who took the stand to describe her interactions with Robert. I met with Robert and Victoria Hendricks on 3 separate occasions, she testified. During each meeting, Robert was alert, engaged, and clearly understood the implications of the decisions he was making. He asked detailed questions about tax implications, about probate procedures, and about how to best protect his wife's financial security. Did you have any concerns about his mental capacity? Margaret's associate asked. None whatsoever. In fact, Robert was more thorough and thoughtful than many clients half his age. He specifically asked me to explain certain provisions multiple times to ensure he understood them completely. Did Mrs. Hendricks ever try to influence or control the conversation? Not at all. She primarily listened while Robert and I discussed his options. When she did speak, it was usually to ask clarifying questions or to provide information Robert requested. The final witness was Dr. Patricia Chen, a psychiatrist who had reviewed Robert's medical records at Margaret's request. "In your professional opinion," Margaret asked, "was Robert Hendricks mentally competent to execute a will 1 month before his death?" "Absolutely. His medical records show no evidence of dementia, significant cognitive decline, or any condition that would impair his ability to understand legal documents. The medications he was taking might have caused some fatigue, but they would not have affected his decision-making capacity." "What about the confusion mentioned by family members?" "Confusion during acute illness is very different from the kind of cognitive impairment that would invalidate a legal document. A person can be temporarily confused due to pain, medication, or the stress of hospitalization while still retaining their overall mental capacity." After 3 days of testimony, both sides presented their closing arguments. Blackwood painted a picture of a confused old man manipulated by a scheming wife. Margaret presented the facts. Medical records, witness testimony, and legal documentation, all supporting Robert's competency. Judge Reinhardt took a recess to consider her decision. The 30 minutes felt like hours as I sat in the courthouse hallway, watching Marcus and Jennifer whispering urgently with their lawyer. Emma and David had come for the final day of testimony, sitting behind me in moral support. David had taken time off work, and Emma had driven down from Philadelphia with Chloe. "Mom," Emma said during the recess, "I'm so sorry you had to go through this. I'm sorry we all had to go through this." "Are you?" I asked, studying her face. "Yes. Whatever happens with the house, this was wrong. Marcus was wrong to challenge Dad's will, and we were wrong to support him without questioning his version of events." When court reconvened, Judge Reinhardt's expression was stern as she looked out at the courtroom. "This case," she began, "represents a troubling trend I've seen too often in recent years. Adult children who feel entitled to their parents' assets and are willing to use the court system to override their parents' clearly expressed wishes." I felt my heart leap with hope. The evidence presented clearly shows that Robert Hendricks was mentally competent when he executed his will. The medical records, witness testimony, and professional opinions all support this conclusion. The testimony suggesting otherwise was largely speculative and based on limited observations by family members with no medical training. She looked directly at Marcus. "Furthermore, I find the timing of this challenge suspicious. The plaintiff waited until after his mother had been informed she must vacate the family home before filing this action, suggesting this is more about acquiring property than protecting an incompetent person's interests." I had to grip Margaret's arm to keep from crying with relief. The will contest is denied. The will stands as written. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. As people began filing out of the courtroom, I remained seated for a moment, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. I had won, but the victory felt hollow. I had saved my house, but I had lost my relationship with my eldest son, perhaps permanently. Margaret squeezed my shoulder. "You did it, Victoria. You protected yourself, just like Robert wanted." I looked across the aisle where Marcus was having a heated conversation with his lawyer. Jennifer was crying, and for a moment I felt sorry for them. They had gambled everything on this lawsuit and lost. But then I remembered the lies, the manipulation, the break-in, the public humiliation, and my sympathy evaporated. David and Emma approached the table, both looking relieved but subdued. "Congratulations, Mom," David said quietly. "Thank you for being here," I replied. "Both of you." "We should have been here from the beginning," Emma said, tears in her eyes. "We should have questioned Marcus's story from the start." I stood up, gathering my purse and the legal documents that had just secured my future. "You're here now. That's what matters." As we walked toward the courthouse exit, I saw Marcus waiting by the doors. My stomach clenched, expecting another confrontation. Instead, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, part anger, part shame, part something that might have been regret. "Mom," he said quietly. I stopped, waiting. He started, then stopped. "I hope you'll be happy in the house." It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't another attack either. I studied his face, looking for some sign of the boy I'd raised, the man I'd thought he'd become. "I hope you'll find happiness too, Marcus, but not at my expense." He nodded slightly and walked away with Jennifer, disappearing into the crowd outside the courthouse. 6 months later, I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee and reading the morning paper. The basement apartment was finished and rented to a lovely graduate student who helped with yard work in exchange for reduced rent. My finances were stable, my house was secure, and I was learning to build a new life without Robert. Emma visited regularly with Chloe, and David's family came for Sunday dinners. Marcus and I had exchanged exactly 3 text messages since the trial, stilted, formal communications about practical matters. Jennifer had blocked me on social media. The grandchildren I barely saw anymore were growing up without me. The price of keeping my home had been higher than I'd anticipated. But as I looked around the kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals, where I'd helped with homework and celebrated holidays, I knew I'd made the right choice. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Mrs. Hendricks, this is Patricia Reeves from the Elder Law Clinic. I received your name from Margaret Collins. She said you might be interested in volunteering to help other seniors who are facing family disputes over their estates." I smiled, thinking of Robert's final words to me. "Promise me you'll protect yourself." Maybe it was time to help others do the same. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I'd be very interested in that. As I hung up the phone, I walked to the living room and picked up the wedding photo from the mantelpiece. Robert and I looked so young, so hopeful, so unaware of the challenges that lay ahead. "I kept my promise," I whispered to his picture. "I protected myself. And now I'm going to help others do the same." Outside, the autumn leaves were falling. But inside my house, my home, I was finally at peace. The battle had been brutal, the cost had been high, but I had survived. I had fought for my dignity and won. And for the first time since Robert's funeral, that felt like enough.